Thank you. Thank you for those kind words of introduction, and it's just so great to be here with you today and to be able to share some of the insights of the world's largest study of workplace well-being. We've been now studying and running this project for the last 3 years, and I'm going to structure the insights that have come out and the learnings that we're seeing around 4 empirical questions that I've put on the screen behind me. So we'll start by, how do we measure workplace well-being in practice? How do we do so at a scale never seen before? What do the data tell us about what seems to be driving how people feel at work and their relative importance? I will also touch upon our research on how employee well-being matters for productivity, how it matters for attracting talent, how it matters for retaining talent. And I will also try and find the time in the next 20 minutes to then bring it all together to see how employee well-being could also, at an organizational level, influence company performance. And I will apply financial markets results as well as stock market performance for this. As you can tell, we've got a lot to go through in the next 20 minutes. I've prepared a lot of material for you in very little time, so if it feels like I'm rushing you through all of this material, then that's probably because I am rushing you through this material. And so please bear with me, but I hope that throughout these 2 wonderful days here in Como, we'll get to speak and deep dive even deeper into some of this material. And I've also made sure, as it bestows a proper academic, to put the references on each slide in case you want to dig a bit deeper into some of this material, most of which is online or about to be published soon enough. All right, without further ado, let's get started by asking ourselves the question, how do we measure workplace well-being in practice? Well, there's only one way of doing this, which is by asking people. And the way we ask it in this world's largest study is by asking them about how people feel, whether they feel happy at work, whether they're content and satisfied with their job, whether they experience negative stressors or not, and whether they find purpose at work. Those are the 4 items that we're asking, and that together give us a holistic picture of how people feel at work. The aficionados in the room, most of you, will probably recognize that these 4 items mirror the consensus when measuring general well-being as proposed by the OECD, and especially the 4 items that the UK Office for National Statistics uses to measure general well-being in the population in England and the rest of the United Kingdom. I also want to emphasize the importance of conceptually distinguishing the outcome measure of well-being, how people feel at work, from what makes them feel the way they do or why they feel the way they do. Those are better considered drivers. So when we're thinking about social connections or managerial support or fair pay, those you should consider drivers that will hopefully positively influence the outcome measure of workplace well-being, which is how we feel at work. And you'll see just how important all of this is. Now, how do we measure this at a scale never seen before? Well, you need an incredible partner. And this partner is Indeed. Indeed is the world's largest job search platform. There's about 250 million people each month going onto the website, and it's that traffic that we can use to crowdsource, and that's obviously the key to doing things at scale, to crowdsource surveys and responses to the items that I've just put on the screen before. The result of this massive effort is that in the space of less than 3 years, we've crowdsourced over 15 million company reviews, so individuals telling us how they feel about their employer or working at their employer or their previous employer. This is across multiple markets, about 20 markets at the moment, but most data is available for the United States, and that's the kind of data that I'll be using today. This gives you a sense for what it looks like. These are the questions being shown, and I'll dig into it later. We don't just ask the 4 well-being outcome measures, we also ask a whole host of drivers, and I'll talk about that in a second. So what do we find, just roughly, descriptively? Well, huge variation in employee well-being across companies, across industries, across job types, across regions. And I've just put some examples here on the screen. And you do need to realize this world's largest study of workplace well-being, thanks to Indeed, is the first time we can compare pretty much all major corporates in the exact same way, and we've never been able to do that before. So when we take, for example, the companies in a very standardized industry, which is flipping burgers, hamburger, fast food chains, you'll find that even in such a standardized place of work, you'll find huge variation in how people experience work, how they feel at work. And whether you're measuring it through job satisfaction, workplace happiness, a sense of purpose at work, or stress or the absence thereof, it is consistently that these differences show up. So look, for example, at McDonald's versus In-N-Out Burger, which the Americans in the room will be very familiar with, especially if you live on the West Coast. So that's that. But the data is so rich that we can dig even deeper. We can go within companies. So the large companies, we have tens of thousands of responses for, reviews from their employees, current or past. And so what you're seeing here is one example of Walmart, where we can see that there's huge variation even within the company. So between warehouses, stores, units, you'll find massive difference. And I think one key insight coming out of the data so far is that let nobody tell you that it is not possible to improve workplace well-being. Because whether we find in the data wonderful places to work where people are happy to work in tough regions, in tough industries, and even within companies that may not be performing super well, you'll find units that are doing well and are leading by example to really show the way forward about creating a great place to work. So please, please, please do remember that. All right, on to the drivers. Outcomes is what we just looked at. Let's dig into drivers. And here I want to sort of pause and also give you a moment for reflection, which is, if you look at possible drivers of employee well-being, we can think of a sense of belonging, being paid fairly, a sense of inclusion, diversity, supportive management, trust, learning on the job, and possibilities for career progression and achievement. Which one of these items do you think matters most to you or to your teams? That's the quick intellectual exercise you should be doing now. And it is an exercise that we asked of 4,500 or so managers and workers around the United States. And what they came back with is sort of a rank order of what they think matters most in driving their well-being at work. And what comes out is, first and foremost, and this pleases the neoclassical traditional economists, fair compensation for the work we do. And then comes flexibility and appreciation, and so on and so forth. This is the rank order that people think matters most for workplace well-being. But then when you actually run the analyses and see what actually correlates most strongly with the outcome measures of how we feel, we find that being paid fairly is important, but it falls to the middle of the pack. And what comes all the way on top is a sense of belonging. Something that people didn't quite think of as important as some of the other items. And if you, in your intellectual or mental exercise, didn't put a sense of belonging at the very top or near the top, you are not alone. In fact, only 6% of managers will have put a sense of belonging at the very top of what seemed to be most strongly correlated with your revealed workplace well-being. And only 34 would have put it in the top 5. Sense of belonging is a difficult driver to define, but when we dig a bit deeper, we would define it as feeling like the company cares about you as a human being, having friends at work, and sort of knowing the impact of what you're doing at the company on others within the organization. That's sort of a definition or a sense for what belonging means. So it's essentially your social capital, your social ties, and a sense of belonging. All right. On to, does well-being matter for productivity, recruitment, and retention? And I'll start with the study that has taken us the most time, many, many years to be precise, 7 years to be even more precise. And it's a study that required yet another partner, in this case, British Telecom, BT, as it's known in the United Kingdom, the largest private sector work employer. We studied all of their call center employees. And we asked them on Thursday afternoons, how happy do you feel this week? And then they responded on these smileys from 1 to 5, and then it disappeared a bit like a calendar invite. And this was the start of a major project, but we're very pleased to say that we think we've nailed for the first time the causal link between how we feel as individuals and how productive we are, because we then match these employee well-being data from week to week to week with the very, very granular performance data of these call center workers, and there's incredible levels of data available about them. Let me start by giving one general sense for the results that came back to us. These are the 20 or so call centers spread around the UK. And what you're seeing on the horizontal axis is the average weekly employee happiness that was reported in those call centers. And on the vertical axis, what you're seeing is the average weekly customer satisfaction coming back. So this gives you a first correlational sense for, hey, how people feel in the workplace seems to be correlating very darn strongly with how customers perceive the quality of the job being done. But really, where we dug a lot deeper and where it took us a lot more time is to look at the individual link. And this is where call centers are interesting, because we can measure individual well-being and tie it to individual performance. And what we find here, and the headline result for this study, is essentially that for a 1-point change on a scale from 0 to 10, we found a 12% increase in weekly sales. And we have many other metrics of performance, but that's kind of the headline result that was picked up in the media. Now, why is it that there was such a strong causal effect of how we feel from one week to another to how we perform one week to another? It is not because people work longer hours or put more effort in, et cetera, et cetera. No, it was because they were just working better. We found that they had heightened sense, or it activated more their social and emotional intelligence, and that translated just in getting more conversion in terms of the calls. I'll give you an extreme example, which would be if a disgruntled customer called in, well, people who felt better that week were way more likely to be able to retain that customer than otherwise would have been the case. And so it was really powerful to see the impact and the pathways through which and why there was such impact. All right. We can talk a lot more about the BT study, but let's move on to the second pathway why I think there's impact on overall performance, and that is through recruitment. Are better places to work also better able at attracting talent, something that is incredibly top of mind for most business leaders these days. And here I have to point to the exceptional work by my colleague George Ward, who this is now just online. It's been published as an MIT working paper and will hopefully come out very soon in a top peer-reviewed journal. He's been able to nail for the first time and provide causal field evidence for a good workplace being able to attract better people. And the way he did it was to show on the job search ads information about the workplace, thanks to the incredible data gathering effort of Indeed. And so randomizing 24 million job seekers into seeing or not seeing what a great place to work is, he found that there's an effect on people's job search behavior. So people migrate their job seeking away from less good workplaces to better workplaces. So whether it's through word of mouth or through amazing crowdsourced efforts on Indeed or Glassdoor and the likes, people are starting to change their behavior in function of whether it's a good place to work or not so good place to work. Okay, third channel through which employee well-being may impact the performance of companies is through retention. This is another company, Glassdoor, and there's a number of ways of showing this relationship, but this I thought was pretty cute and will resonate. The same thing here. You can measure whether people go out and apply for other jobs depending or in function of whether or not they've given high or low ratings for the company they currently are employed at. So essentially, people are twice as likely to go out and look for another job and literally apply for other jobs within the space of a week if they're if they're much lower in terms of the rating that they give. So 2 out of 5 will lead people to really apply twice as likely that week for another job than a 5 out of 5. So there's a lot of cumulative evidence coming through that really suggests that there are pathways through which this works. And you see over the past 7, 8, 9 years, we've been working on lots of research projects that together are starting to give a very empirical, strong picture around what it is workplace well-being. So how do we measure it, 1. 2, what drives it, the relative importance of these drivers and how they change over time, pre-COVID, COVID, post-COVID. And then on the other hand, the outputs, what it seems to impact on the business side. So does it improve productivity? Does it help you attract talent? Does it help you retain talent? And what does it do to your cost of capital in terms of your opportunity to raise investment? And there's more to come on that front. So you're seeing we're working really hard to try and put it all in one massive holistic model that will hopefully be very useful to you and as I hope once we release this. Okay, what I haven't told you as of yet is, how do these 4 channels, these 4 pathways through impacting performance, do they leverage and scale at the organizational level? Because one thing that people tend to forget when they say, oh, a happy worker is a more productive worker, well, yes, but what does it take to make a workplace a happier workplace? There's a certain investment to be made, and is the net benefit positive or not? And the only way to find out whether these pathways all lead and come together in a net positive outcome for the company is by bringing them all together and running analyses between employee well-being at the company level and the financial performance and stock market performance. And that's what the world's largest study has now finally allowed us and been able to do. So the proper business case, if you will, for investing in employee well-being, I think is now only for the first time been properly made, and I'm very keen to share some of the results with you. The first set of results are on financial performance. What you're seeing behind me are US companies that are stock listed. There's about 700 of them for whom we have sufficient data crowdsourced through Indeed to tell us how people feel at those companies. And obviously, stock-listed companies have to report all of their financial performance metrics every quarter in a very standardized, systematic way. And that's the data that we use and match it with the employee well-being that gets reported to us in those same quarters. And what you're seeing behind me is that there's a very strong correlation between how people feel at the company and the firm's value, the return on assets, and the gross profitability of an organization. It's correlational. We're digging much deeper into these data to also see the predictive power of it. But I do think that one thing that you'll really appreciate is what I'm about to show you next, which gives you a sense of that predictive power in terms of the stock market performance. What you're seeing behind me is simply the standard US indices, the S&P 500, the NASDAQ Top 100, and the Dow Jones. And it's gone up in the bull run of 2021. It's come very much down, as most of you will have been acutely aware, in 2022. And it's been very volatile at the start of this year, the months of January, February, and early March of 2023. Now imagine that you could invest in a portfolio just made up of the world's best workplaces, or at least in the context of the United States, the best workplaces. Well, thanks to this massive crowdsourced data set that allows us to compare all these companies, especially all the large ones that tend to be available on the stock market, that's exactly what we've done. So I'm about to show you essentially the returns on a portfolio just based on listening to workers and how they experience the workplace and investing on that basis. This is how we've done in our stock market portfolio. This is simply by taking the 2020 data on how people feel, putting the top 100, or we can play around with the top 50, the top 10, the top 150, whatever you want to do, but here for sake of simplicity, the top 100 companies out of the 700 or so that we have access to that are stock listed. And what we're seeing is essentially that the 2020 data, rank order, take the top 100, and then invest $10 in our little portfolio at the start of 2021, on January 1st, 2021, and then go back to bed. Wake up about a year later and see what's happened. In the bull run, the high well-being companies outperformed the other indices. In the bear run, our companies where there's high levels of well-being were more resilient. And in the very volatile first few months of this year, we see that we've really, really outperformed as compared to the standard indices. So clearly, there's something to these very subjective, fluffy data that come back through how people feel at work. It seems to be highly predictive of something, and something that the stock market doesn't necessarily pick up on. In fact, if you really want to put numbers on this, by now, our portfolio would be worth about $1,300, so that's about a 30% return. Compare that with what you would have gotten if you just invested in a standard indices. In fact, to be honest, more than double at this stage than you would have done in the S&P, and a lot more had you only invested in tech stocks. So this is wonderful work, I think, but I'm also acutely aware of the fact that we should invest in employee well-being and good workplaces for its own good reasons, because it's the right thing to do. But I'm sure that you have also encountered out there in conversations that it still takes raw, hard data to convince a lot of CEOs or CFOs to make the investment. Because most of us, and even leaders, in fact, 87% of senior managers believe that there's a competitive advantage to investing in workplace well-being or having a high workplace well-being in your organization. But the sad truth is, as has been revealed also in discussions earlier today, that only about 35% have actually made it a strategic priority. So my hope is that our hard work on the scientific side will help you all make the case when you have these discussions, and that it's not 35%, but in a year or two, when we come back for the next WAHASU, it's still 45, and 5 years from now, it'll be 80%, and hopefully 10 years from now, 100% of leaders will have put workplace well-being at the very heart of their strategies, and I hope that these kind of data will make it possible. Another thing that we all need to do is to come together very strongly and put our shoulders behind making sure that these metrics are at the heart of business and policy making, and that's exactly what we've been trying to do. We've been setting up the World Wellbeing Movement and attracting wonderful, exemplary corporations, movements, and foundations to put their shoulders behind this mission of measuring what you treasure, because what gets measured gets done. And so with that, thank you very much.